What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. For today's video, we're going to be checking out the Transformers movie masterpiece MPM-15 Decepticon BRAWL. Based off the original 2007 live-action movie, BRAWL transforms into a modified M1 battle tank, which just by itself is one of the many reasons why I loved some of those earlier Decepticon designs. Even when in their vehicle forms, they still came across as super imposing, and I thought it was wicked how that most of his weaponry from his robot mode was still of complete use to him. The tank mode looks awesome and has been painted front side to back with some really killer camo details. The sculpting throughout looks sharp, especially when it comes around to the back. For the most part, this guy's been filled in all the way around, resulting in what has to be one of the most screen accurate looking tanks that I think we've so far seen for this character. Even the hatch up front, which for the last 17 years I've always believed to be a cutout so that his head has storage when in tank mode, is surprisingly spot on to the actual on-screen movie vehicle. This form also easily has the most amount of articulation I think we've ever seen from a tank former. In addition to both the upper and lower deck being rotatable, each of the turrets can be individually articulated along with the missile pods, so this guy should really have no issues in wiping out the Autobots front side to back. I also thought that it was pretty cool how you can still soup him up to the max by using all of the additional blast effects and weapons from his robot mode to truly create a look which is overkill. The only small fault that I can find is that he is unfortunately missing the smaller hand-mounted machine guns up top, which even the original 2007 leader class figure had, but I imagine this is absent due to this guy's transformation, and it's not like he is slacking in the weaponry department. Blasting our way through some vehicle mode comparisons, we are first of all whacking out the original 2007 leader class movie BRAWL, which to my surprise is near enough spot on to the scale of this brand new movie masterpiece figure. Here is how he sizes up alongside the leader of the Autobots. The scaling I think looks pretty decent between these two. It really is just such a shame that we never saw these two actually face off against each other in that original movie. Next up we have Bumblebee, and then last but by no means least we are whacking out the miniguns, that being the most recent mainline release for this character, the Studio Series Voyager class BRAWL, which to my surprise again in the accuracy department still holds its own compared alongside the masterpiece version. To be honest guys, I don't think there really has ever been a bad BRAWL figure. Even the original 2007 deluxe class was pretty decent for the time that it was released. Turning to BRAWL's transformation, as we've seen from some of the past movie masterpiece figures, this guy is super involved, although yet again, they appear to have struck a fantastic balance between complexity and enjoyability. So, for the first step, take a hold of the front brakes and begin to angle these here downwards, exactly like that. Then for the next step, you are specifically going to want to take a hold of this panel, angle this here upwards, then pull it here outwards, and then you're going to want to extend this here all the way up exactly like this. Once that's complete, we can then take a hold of this panel, angle it slightly inwards like that. Then what you'll do is take a hold of this panel and begin to pull this here backwards. Now that's complete, we can take the main tank turret, angle it here to the side slightly to allow for enough clearance so that we can then take this panel and collapse it here all the way down just like this. You are again going to want to make sure that you do all of the same steps on the opposite side. Now we are going to spin around to the back of BRAWL, take a hold of the top turret and begin to spin this all the way around until the front is now facing the back. Once that's complete, we can then turn around here to this angle, take a hold of both sides of the main tank turret and split these here directly down the middle. As I'm sure you guys would guess, these eventually are going to become the big bad arms for this absolute unit. For the next step, we are now going to spin around here to the side, take a hold of this panel and begin to angle this here upwards. Then for the next step, we can take these sections and begin to angle these here downwards until you are eventually left with something which should be looking exactly like that. Once that's complete, we can then take a hold of this section and begin to spin this here all the way around. Now you must make sure that the arms stay in their original position, otherwise it will make things a little funkier later down the line. Now we are going to turn to what has to be easily my favourite part when it comes to this guy's transformation, just due to it being so different in comparison to the previous BRAWL figures. We are going to completely compress the main tank turret. So for the first step, take the nozzle and begin to angle this here to the right. Then for the second step, we are going to come here to the base and begin to angle this here all the way to the left. Now there is a pretty mighty tab which is going to slide into a slot here, so angle this section here down until that also does snap there into place, and then for one final touch we are then going to turn to the main barrel of this turret and also angle this here upwards. I thought that was some pretty sweet looking compression. So now we're going to turn to the transformation of the arms, and there is some serious compression that goes down here. So take a hold of the bottom, take a hold here of the top. We're now going to detach these in opposite directions to each other. Once that's complete, you're then going to take a hold of this panel and pull this here towards yourself and begin to lift this here upwards exactly like that. Now that's complete, we can then rotate around here at what will become the bicep of the robot mode. We can then take a hold of this shoulder joint and also begin rotating this here all the way around until you are now left with something which should be looking like this. Then for the next step, we are now going to make use out of this double hinge joint. We're going to extend this here upwards, and this tab here is going to slide into that slot. So bring this here up until that there does snap into place. Then what you're going to do is come to the inside part of the shoulder. This tab is going to slide into that tiny little notch. So make sure that that there does snap into place exactly like that. We can then make use out of this panel and compress this down also. This tab is then going to slide into that slot, so snap that sucker there into place, and that is the shoulder now fully transformed. Now we're going to come around here to the forearms, which to be fair are equally as complex. So first of all, make use out of this hinge joint and begin to bring this here upwards until you are now left with something that should be looking like this. We can then take a hold of this panel and also begin to hinge this here upwards and leave it like that for now, because then we're going to turn to this panel and also begin to hinge this here upwards. Now the aim of the game is to slide this smaller panel underneath this larger one, so compress that there all the way inside. You'll then want to make use out of this slot and slide it into that tab until eventually you are left with something which should be looking like this. We can then come around here to the side. You're then going to take the fingers of the robot mode and begin to completely extend these here outwards, and that is the transformation complete for one arm. So again guys, repeat all of the same steps for the opposite side. Once the arms are fully transformed, then for the next step we are going to take a hold of these tires and begin to angle these here backwards until they snap into place. We can then take a hold of this one and begin to compress that sucker there inwards. Then for the next step, you're going to take this entire piece of tread and begin to angle this here upwards exactly like that. We can now spin around here to the underside, and then what you're going to do is detach this tread away from the third and final part, which should be situated around here. Again, do all of the same steps on the opposite side. Once that's complete, we can then proceed to split this guy directly down the middle. We're then going to take a hold of this panel and begin to flip this here backwards. Now that's complete, we can then spin around here to the side, take a hold of this panel and begin to angle this here back until eventually it should be looking like this. Hopefully that should then allow for enough clearance for us to take a hold of the outer part of the tank and also begin bringing this here backwards until eventually it should be looking exactly like that. Now that's complete, we can then take a hold of the tread and begin to flip this here downwards. Then what we can do is spin around here to the front of this guy, and hopefully now is where we can begin work on the awesome foot design. So we're going to take this, we're going to bring it here down, we're then going to rotate this forwards, we're going to take the outer part of the foot and begin angling these here out to the side. So do the same here for that side, spin here to the underside of the foot, then we're going to make use out of these spikes. So snap these here into place just like that. Then we're going to take a hold of the heel spur and also make sure that those snap into place. Then we can come back up here to the top, take a hold of this spike and clip that into place. And there's also a second spike, although this one more or less just rests into place exactly like that. Now that's complete, we can then spin around here to the side. You're going to want to take this panel and begin bringing it around here to the back. Now you're not going to quite want to compress this just yet, because first of all we must make use out of this panel. So what we're going to do is take a hold of this spike, begin to angle this here out to the side. We're then going to come up to this panel and make use out of this hinge joint so that eventually it looks exactly like that. We can now make use out of this double hinge joint, shift this upwards and begin to angle this here inwards. Now what we're going to do is take a hold of this panel and connect it into that tab until you should be left with something which looks exactly like this. Let's now spin around here to the back. You're now going to take this panel, snap this here into place, and then finally take a hold of this panel and also clip that there into place. So as I'm sure you guys would guess, do all of the same steps for the opposite side. So with the leg transformation now fully complete, we can begin work on the big bad upper torso. For the first step, take a hold of these rakes and begin to angle these here downwards. You are then going to take a hold of what will become the chest unit and detach this away from what was originally the front part of the tank. So angle this here all the way down exactly like that. We're now going to take a hold of this component and making use out of this hinge joint, we're going to angle it here all the way around until eventually it does snap there into place exactly like that. Now what you're going to do is come around here to these treads. This tab is going to slide into that slot. This is a step that you must make sure you do, otherwise it's going to make things later on slightly more challenging. Again, make sure to do the same on the opposite side. With that now complete, you should find that these parts of the treads very nicely slide into those slots. So snap those in on both sides. You are then going to want to take a hold of the shoulder, begin to angle this here inwards like that. Now this tab is going to slide into that slot. So make sure that it very nicely locks into place. Once that's complete, what we can then do is rotate around here at the shoulder joint. We're now going to take a hold of this component and begin to stick that there out to the side. As I'm sure you guys would guess, do exactly the same on the opposite side. With that now complete, there is a tab on the underside of this section which is going to slide into this slot. So bring this here all the way down until that there does snap into place. As you're doing that, at the very same time, this tab should then slide into the underside of this panel. So just make sure that both of those connections are secure. We can then spin around here to the front, take a hold of these panels and open these up exactly like the Studio Series version. You're then going to want to take a hold of the entire head sculpt and pull this here forwards. Now these slots in the top are eventually going to be filled by these tabs. So take this entire section here, bring this up and over until this does very nicely snap there into place, and that should be Brawl's head and torso now more or less completely complete. We can then spin him around here to the side, and making use out of these multi-layered hinge joints, we can then compress these to the inside of this guy's torso until you should be left with something which is looking exactly like that. For the next step, we can then take a hold of this tread, angle this here outwards. Now on the underside of this component is a tab, which is then going to slide into that slot. So spin this here all the way around until eventually it does very nicely snap there into place. Coming back around to this guy's backpack, we are now going to want to whack out this connector, which eventually will very nicely slide inside that slot. Now before we do that, we then have to hinge this here upwards, and at the very same time, this panel here must slide underneath this one exactly like this. Make sure that you've also done the same on the opposite side. Now that's complete, we can then connect that connector there into place until it does very nicely snap. To then finish this guy off completely in true 2007 movie Brawl style, we are now going to take the missile pods, begin to angle these here out to the side. We can then rotate them upwards and position them in a way so that they are now facing over the top of the shoulder. Then for the next step, we can take a hold of the antenna, completely straighten this here outwards. Now this slot is then going to slide into that tab, which may be the reason that why in tank mode he is lacking the hand-mounted machine gun that was seen on the actual tank in the movie. So make use out of all of these hinge joints, extend this here upwards until that snaps into place. Then what you're going to do is take this antenna, angle it here backwards, and then make use out of this hinge joint and compress this here downwards exactly like that. Now for a finishing touch, you are then going to want to make sure that this tab slides into a slot underneath this turret. So snap that there into place and make sure that you also do the same on the opposite side, and that is a wrap for the transformation of this absolute beast. Devastating his way through the battlefield of Mission City, here we have Brawl now fully transformed into his robot mode. And much like the previous two Masterpiece Decepticons, he is a near perfect recreation of how he appeared in the movie. The design has always been by far one of my favourites from the original 2007 movie crew, just due to him being an absolute unit, to the point where not even the combined power of 3 Autobots could wipe this guy out. The head sculpt I think looks amazing, and again is super close to the on-screen design. His quadruple eyes look wicked and are a great carryover from what most of the Decepticons from that film were packing. I'm also a big fan of the painted on battle damage which can be seen throughout, especially when it comes to his chest, really giving you the idea that this guy has taken one hell of a pounding, although it is his arm and leg design which I think is packing the biggest punch. They are super complex when it comes to design and are still packing all of the various spikes and sharp points that we saw in the film. I've always loved how even his fingers look like serrated knives, which again really gives you the impression that this guy is savage. The back of the figure also has been really nicely detailed and for the most part cleans up well. One of the biggest engineering step ups here, and something which I'm so glad to see gone, would be finally the compression of the main tank turret. With past releases, it either became an arm blaster, something he could use as an underslung weapon, or just a rod dangling between his legs. So this is really awesome and it's exactly the engineering expected from a movie masterpiece. Overall, Brawl's design is just killer. A fantastic final entry to round off the core 2007 movie crew, and one which honestly I wouldn't mind seeing repainted to resemble his Revenge of the Fallen Desert Deco counterpart. Now, checking out Brawl's accessories, as if this guy wasn't packing enough as is, first up we do see the return of his Cybertronian railgun, which I think by far is my favourite out of the bunch. The detail looks sick, especially when it comes to that awesome scope. The next weapon is a fusion between two, that being a blade and a machine gun, and I thought it was really cool how this is also packing an outer armament to really give you the impression that, much like in the movie, this is an extension. This is something which has actually transformed out of this guy's forearm, and the integration between both of those weapons is seamless, so this is sick. The next set of accessories are a shed ton of extra blast effects, so both of which can be attached onto not only the missile pods, but also that wicked Cybertronian railgun. By far, the coolest out of the bunch would have to be this missile cluster, and I can't lie to you guys, when it does come to detail and sculpt, this thing is on fire. Next up, we have an awesome blast effect. Now, I'm not sure who over at Takara Tomy and Hasbro is obsessed with recreating the deaths of the Transformers as seen in the movie, but this is actually the impact blast which Bumblebee fatally issues in the movie to send Brawl to his demise, and I can't lie to you guys, when it does come to sculpting, much like that missile cluster, this thing here is looking sick. Finally, to really sell the extent of Brawl's battle damage in the movie, we also have one severed elbow joint, which I think looks sick. This is of course to recreate the scene in the movie where Ratchet savagely cuts Brawl's arm clean off. When it comes to the cybernetic tendons, I think this here is looking wicked, and I'm also a big fan of the cinched components. So alongside Bone Crusher, both of those baddies can be battle damage buddies. Turning to Brawl's posability, despite transforming into a full-blown tank, this guy is surprisingly super articulated. To begin with, the head is on a ball joint. This will look up, it will look down, it can then tilt side to side and turn both left to right. In addition to that, the mouth can also open and close to reveal some awesome serrated teeth detail. The missile pods can hinge upwards, they can hinge downwards, they can also turn side to side. The shoulders are ratcheted and can kick outwards to that far. They can also click forwards and click backwards. The elbow joint though is stacked. This is packing a total of 3 separate joints, 2 elbow bends, as well as a bicep swivel, which I thought was awesome. In addition to that, the wrist has no issue in turning both left to right, so no gorilla arms for this guy, and the fingers are individually articulated, especially when it comes here to the larger ones. These are packing a total of 2 individual joints. His waist can turn side to side, although unfortunately can't do the complete Exorcist twist, mainly due to how the backpack transforms. The hips can kick forwards, roughly to that far, and surprisingly backwards despite the transformation of the backpack. If you take a hold of this rubbery spike and pull this sucker here downwards, it then allows for a fantastic high kick out to the side. The thigh can turn side to side. The knee is packing a supreme ratchet, although something worth bearing in mind would be that those back panels definitely do have a tendency to detach, so that is something worth looking out for, although to be fair, they are super easy to attach. And then last but by no means least, in addition to the foot being able to turn side to side, it can also rock inwards, and considering that most of the die cast of this figure is stored in the shin, he definitely is super well grounded, so you are able to recreate some pretty banging poses from that original 2007 movie. But as I'm sure you guys all know by now, to see what Brawl is truly capable of, now let's put him through the pose test. Blasting our way through some robot mode comparisons, we are yet again taking another trip down memory lane by whacking out the 2007 leader class movie Brawl. Firing through the now completed 2007 movie masterpiece lineup, first up we have Megatron, next up we have Starscream, the last wicked entry into the masterpiece lineup we have Bone Crusher, and alongside Blackout, these three by far have to be some of the best masterpiece figures that Hasbro and Takara Tomy have ever brought out for the live action movies. Because I mean, come on guys, that Blackout looks simply killer. Rounding it off for the original Decepticon crew, we finally have Barricade, and it's a shame that neither of these two included Frenzy. I'm hoping that if we ever do see a clunker Bumblebee released in the future, that maybe they can somehow slip him in there. When it comes round to the masterpiece Autobots, we are starting it off with the leader of the bunch, Optimus Prime, the weapon specialist Ironhide, and am I the only one who thought that maybe Brawl and Ironhide could have gone head to head against each other? Seriously, Brawl was packing as many weapons as Ironhide was, and it would have been awesome to have seen a 1v1 between the two. Here is the Doctor of Doom. We have Ratchet, Bumblebee, and then last but by no means least, the smallest and coolest out of the bunch, Autobot Jazz. And finally, just to wrap things up completely, here we have the Studio Series Brawl. So, wrapping up on this review for the Transformers movie masterpiece MPM-15, Decepticon BRAWL. This guy is amazing, easily the best transforming version of this character that we've ever seen. The robot mode looks near enough spot on to the very complex early 2007 Michael Bay design. The only minor issue that I have found when it comes around to his robot mode would be that the back panels on the legs do have a tendency to become very easily detached. He's packing some awesome accessories, easily some of the best looking blast effects that I think we've ever seen from an official release, and when it comes around to that tank mode, for the most part, a straight 10 out of 10 knockout. This is exactly what I would expect from a full-blown masterpiece figure, and quality-wise, this is a huge step up in comparison to some of the earlier MPM releases. If you're like myself and you were a big fan of some of those Michael Bay designs, then without any doubt at all, this is by far one of the best looking live-action movie figures that I think we've ever seen officially made. I would love to get your guys' thoughts down below. What do you think of MPM-15? I want to thank you all so much for watching, and until my next review, transform and roll out!